Hey YouTubers, like with Mike here of course. I haven't done one of these in a while. It's time for another episode of songs that shaped my life, and this is definitely one of them. You know, a lot of times the songs that shaped my life, it's not really about like they actually shaped my life, they're just part of the soundtrack to my life. But I remember this song was all over the airwaves in April, May of 1977, and I was in 6th grade, Mrs. Yo's class. And it was a transitional time for me. It was the last year of elementary school, and I was lucky to have some really great teachers in elementary school. Probably my favorite teachers were in elementary school. Mrs. Yo, of course, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Mrs. Rosenberg, Mrs. Schumacher, Mrs. Ulrich, they were all great teachers. And but what Mrs. Yo did, all my years we were always sitting in rows, and I think she knew, you know, we were moving on from childhood to adolescence. So what she did in her class, instead of us all sitting in rows, she had tables, and she made it 3 girls and 3 boys on every table. And you know, when you're in I don't know what it's like now, but in elementary school, when I was in elementary school way back in the 70s, you know, the boys hung out with the boys, the girls hung out with the girls, but you know, so we were all thrown together, and it was interesting. That's transitional from from childhood to adolescence, and we sat at that table all year and became really good friends, you know. Me, Eric, John, Kathy, Sue, and Stacy. And we got to know each other really well, talk to each other, and really, it was definitely, it was a genius idea, Mrs. Yo. You know, it was kind of neat. You know, we usually just hung out with our boys and stuff, and now we were, you know, talking to girls and stuff, which was, you know, wasn't something we normally did. And we got to really know, you know, Sue, Stacy, and Kathy a lot, and we really enjoyed talking to them and getting to know them. And so this song would be on the air all the time in May of '77, which was really the last month of school. And for some reason, we were always singing it and stuff. And so it kind of just reminded me, you know, I didn't know about at the time what Mrs. Yo was doing, you know, introducing us to, you know, blending, you know, getting away with just hanging out with the boys or hanging out with just the girls, and getting to the next step, adolescence. And so that was really great. I learned a lot that year talking with, you know, my table mates and stuff. And that song was constantly on. We'd be singing it and talking about goofy stuff like that. And I knew, you know, the next year was going to be junior high school, which scared the heck out of me, because naturally as an introvert, I was always scared when it comes to change. So she tried to make that transition by doing that, you know, making the group tables with the boys and the girls in 6th grade, to make that transition to junior high a little bit easier for us. And I appreciate her for doing that. She was an amazing teacher, and I can't believe she did this on our last day of school. Well, not the last day, but after our last day of school, she invited her entire class to her home for a pool party, and we all went there and went swimming and stuff. Can you imagine the liability issues of a teacher doing that if something happened, you know, someone drowned, God forbid? But, you know, it was a different world in the 70s than it is now. And it was a great time. And I'll always remember, you know, how Mrs. Yo was trying to make that transition from childhood to adolescence a lot easier for us. It was a great lesson to be learned. And that's my